I have been blessed and lucky enough to work with an exhaust company for the last 20 years. And when I need to build an exhaust for a vehicle, I just make a phone call and the right kit comes in. But I wanted to bring Richard in so he could explain to you, as well as myself, why we use certain kits to build certain exhaust systems. If you're a fan of overhauling, you've seen Richard build hundreds of exhaust systems to fit every one of those cars. Probably the biggest help I ever had on overhauling. I remember the very first one, Bud Brutzman, the producer, and I, we worked for 6 hours to finish the exhaust system on that car. And when you came in, you eliminated me having to do that. And it was like the heavens opened.
Well, it was actually just as beneficial to us too, because we weren't building traditional exhaust. And up until that time, really exhaust was sort of, again, an afterthought. It was something you had to take and have custom done. And for the most part, having a kit that could accommodate most of the parts and things that were under the car was pretty rare. And what we found was through the hundreds of cars that we built and the variations from stock to highly modified, we were able to kind of see the whole scope of what was really being done by the people in the market. So you were just as helpful in allowing us the ability to actually create these kits for the consumers. Yeah, we put a lot into putting a lot in the box, and you'll kind of see that when we dig through the number of pieces in here. It starts with the most basic part, which is our mufflers. We've got our 4x9x14 offset center. This is probably the most common used muffler that we put into what we would call a muscle car, and even up until modern muscle cars, to deal with the amount of noise and create that kind of signature Magnaflow sound that you want. But most importantly, it's still that straight through design, so you're not looking at anything that's restrictive, so you can still support all that horsepower. And this covers everything from Oldsmobile to Chevelle to El Camino, all the GM A-body platforms, and we provide all the hangers as necessary in the kit.
What kit is this?
So this is our GM A-body kit. So this covers early 60s to middle or mid 70s, all A-bodies, and all the different wheelbases, and really with the front pipes too. That's really when I started with this system, is kind of talking about why we call it what we do. A lot of people ask the question, what is a crossmember back, you know?
This was developed when you started working on overhauling, so you would have a system to bring in.
Correct. When we decided that we were going to jump on board and we're going to have to support all the builds you had, we had to start coming up with a kit that allowed us to have all the tools necessary to do this without having our shop go to the TV set. So I needed everything that I could use in a box, and for the most part, the layout done. So I'm just making minor modifications, which up at the front, that's really where it starts. We decided that we wanted to incorporate our Truex, and that's something that a lot of classic cars didn't have, was a crossover pipe.
Right.
H-pipe was something that people put in the aftermarket. X-pipe certainly was more rare, but what we wanted to do was to give you the performance and the sound of an X-pipe with a straight-through muffler. So this became an integral part, but we wanted to make sure that we could get to the crossmember. So transmission, engine up here, that crossmember that holds the transmission is where the system started, because front of that, we didn't know what motor was going to be in it.
Whether it's headers or exhaust manifolds or whatnot,
Yep.
This is a kit that will adapt to either way.
Correct, and from different transmissions, because as you know, the automatic's big pan is really wide, so you use this angle this way. And if you have a manual transmission, which is a much narrower setup, we now have the less wide version, so it doesn't have to go to the perimeter of the frame to get around the front end. So even with the bends that we chose and the angles we chose and the cut lengths, we're trying to make accommodations for a narrower pan out of a manual transmission to the wider pan of an automatic. And with the difference in length, we're able to kind of meet up to different headers too. In most cases, long tube header stops where? Crossmember?
Right.
So this almost bolts up.
So you've got the length, but if you have this kit, you need to know what you're putting it on.
Correct.
To get the final parts that you need to build your system.
And that's the only part of fabrication really that's involved with this kit. Everything else is included here. It has everything you need to bolt it to the car.
You've got all your clamps, you've got your hangers, everything else you need.
And it's all designed around not having to be a fabricator. So when we have our hangers, we have a hanger that's basically got a couple of frame washers here and these isolators so that they'll go on the back of the muffler. And what we can do is we can use an existing hole and we can put a nut on either side. And these can be bent to fit using existing holes, or if you'd like to relocate the hanger, or if you've done body work to the bottom of the vehicle, we're able to basically make this least amount of invasive work. You don't have to weld to something. We're able to put the big washer, put this through the body panel, kind of right back where the seat buckets are, and then hang the exhaust system. So we include those. We have some other stabilization hangers that can be put on the tailpipes depending on whether you want to build a full-length exhaust, which we are able to do here for all the different chassis, or, well, where do we put our tips? There's still a great deal of people out there that have gone and done a 4-link type suspension,
right,
where you don't have room for all the tailpipe because of linkage. Maybe they've tubbed it and put some bigger tires in it and they want to do a turn down.
There you have a turn down.
So the kit gives you everything.
Or you could actually turn it out.
Correct, behind the rear tire.
Put a system like this.
Yep.
That right there.
And that would be under the axle on a 4-link. And then what we do provide for is the hoops so that we can go over the axle for a vehicle that has the ground clearance to accommodate that.
Yeah, or you could even cut them here and put your tip right on that, lay it over.
Right. There's a lot of options here that don't require you to bend custom pipe, to have a crush bender, and really not to actually be a professional welder.
Right.
If you can tack a few pieces together, we've done the majority of the work so that we give you the slip fits and we give you all the possible amount of clamps to make this adjustable enough so that you can figure out how you want to finish it,
right,
and then where everything fits up front.
So this is a great system or a great kit for somebody that is not a fabricator.
Correct. This is, again, in mind for the DIYer, all the way up to someone that wants a fairly custom exhaust that is easy to put on. And then that's something that I know you can appreciate is exhaust. When you're talking about going bend by bend, fabricating and working your way through, you can save all of this time. And when you're talking about the time investment versus the money it costs to replace it, this just becomes something that adds to the value of the vehicle that you can spend on other things,
right,
because we've got it all mapped out.
Now, is there another kit that is built just for the fabricator?
We want to still be able to encourage those people that want to go out and build a full custom system to use the products that we have. So the same mufflers and all those tubes available, we make this pipe kit that's a little less preformed and has most of the bends. You're going to have 180s, 90s, 45s, straight pipes that you can choose your mufflers and end up with a system that's totally custom. I think a best example is like what you have in the showroom. And if you have an aftermarket chassis, you have a custom chassis, custom powertrain, anything that you've changed beyond the point of what the stock geometry would allow, we do make that kit as well. That's our custom builder kit.
Well, let's take them in there and show them what we've done on the Corvette chassis. So this is an Art Morrison chassis that's built for a 62 Corvette. And we've got an LT4 motor with some stainless exhaust headers. But all of this was a system that you sent us.
Yeah.
And we custom welded everything back together and then fully polished it.
Right.
And all we've got left is put the tips on once we get the body on it.
And that's really what the custom builder kit's about, is you can take any number of parts that are available on the market and combine them. I mean, we're talking about independent rear suspension in the back, and the framework for this is nothing close to stock. This is basically going to be above what the OEM has produced for the original car, and actually incorporates a lot of better suspension geometry out of newer vehicles to make the car drive great.
Right.
So we still need to make exhaust options, and you can see we use the exact same 4x9x14 stainless steel muffler, and it's just coupled together with a couple of our V-band clamps and put in a place where technically you wouldn't have all of this other bracing that Art Morrison put in there, but we need that custom fit kit to put that in.
We didn't have the room for the X pipe up here.
Correct.
But we did do a crossover pipe here near the tailpipe.
Yeah, and that's something that's, when you're talking about the technology and availability of parts, we want to be able to still control sound. Sound quality is a big deal. And one of the reasons why we push so heavily in the crossmember back kit to have the true X pipe is that sound balance. When you especially are using a later model motor, you're going to get a very different sound with that, especially because these cams are a little less aggressive. They're more what we call an emissions cam. They don't have that lope and chop. So when you have that smoother running motor, they tend to have drone and raspiness. And that TrueX eliminates that. So for those guys using a classic car with one of our crossmember back kits, we put that crossover in there. And if you're going to be doing a full custom, when we designed this one, I encourage to put some kind of a crossover back in it to make the motor sound the best potential way it can.
Now the bands are different. We use the V bands, which are much thinner on this exhaust system. But basically, it's the same parts that we had there.
Correct.
We just custom welded everything together and put the V bands where we needed them so that we could disassemble this system and get it out of the exhaust or out of the frame.
Right.
Because if you notice, we've got holes drilled through the frame that the whole exhaust kit goes through the frame instead of hanging down below it.
And this is the epitome of what a custom exhaust is going to be. And we full well support this with all the parts that you can find. But this does require you to have the design capability to work through it, but also the fabrication skill to go through and actually, as you can see, have to make a few of the pie cuts to make the exact angle and fitment for this particular chassis.
Now we've got a Continental next door.
I'm really excited to see where that one's gone.
We'll take you over and show you what we're doing with the system that we got from Richard for that car. Now, as you can see on the Continental, we've done a lot of custom work on this car, starting off, we cut the roof off of it because the Continentals only came as a coupe. We're making this a full-time roadster. But we also pulled the original motor out and we've got an LS in here. And I wanted the car to look like it still had the Lincoln motor in it. So we used the Lincoln valve covers. And the original car had exhaust manifolds that came up next to it and then exited through the inner panels this way. And we basically laid the exhaust out the same way that it would be laid out on the original car. But we're doing all with the LS and with the kit that Richard supplied us. So it's pretty crazy how this exhaust system was laid out.
Yeah, I mean, wanting the log style manifold versus a traditional multi-tube obviously keeps the car looking more original. But I mean, when you fabricated this, that's a 2.5-inch piece of pipe that you split and kind of opened up. Again, that kind of creative touch, the design capability and the fabrication capability. But this all started off as round tubing that came out of a box that was never intended to do that.
Exactly. What it is a set of headers.
Right.
That we wanted to mimic the original layout, and Cody did a great job on this car. So the logs exit through the inner panel, and then they're in the actual back of the wheel well. You can see it through the front wheel well, and then that exhaust carries through the rocker and then out to the back where we put the crossover pipe.
Well, and that was always the fun part about this build is there's a lot of space constraints. We're not really routing the same kind of exhaust. We're trying to support the same kind of horsepower. So we had to be careful about where heat was and then aesthetically where everything kind of fits. And, from the inner fender well to traveling across, but even still, like we just talked about, you were able to still incorporate that crossover pipe. The LS motors get a little raspy without having a crossover. And here, in that there was just no way with the exhaust entering through the fender wells and going outside the frame. So we had to wait till we got all the way back here. And the guys did a great job of putting a smaller diameter crossover pipe so we still get that balancing effect to keep the sound sounding the way it should.
This is all fabricated because you don't make a kit for the Continental. This was a rare car in the first place.
Well, then I don't make a kit for a chip Continental. That's a little difficult because...
But what's really cool is the way the exhaust exits right through the rear of the bumper.
Well, here, one of the big criteria was this is Linda's car, right?
Yes.
And you had said, we have 400 horsepower, 430 horsepower that we have, but we really want it to sound more mellow. Yes, it's supposed to have the nice warm sound of that V8, but we didn't want it to be a muscle car.
No, this is an elegant car that she's going to tour in.
Right.
And it doesn't need to sound like a race car.
So with the tube sizing and the fact that we're using 4 mufflers, we've got the 2 primaries out in the front, and then we have the smaller resonators that'll actually complement this exit point. We're still able to support horsepower, keep the tone down, and get rid of the unwanted drone and raspiness that you might get out of a quote-unquote hot rod type engine. Because the LS3, let's be truthful, it's a Camaro, it's a Corvette motor that we're putting into something that's going to be an elegant cruiser. And we're able to control that and create the attitude by selecting the right parts in the custom builder kit set.
Exactly. And if she ever drives through Pasadena, she'll be the little young lady from Pasadena.
I really dig this.
Yeah, I love the exhaust points. And then in the front bumper, that's actually a turn signal. So they match the design having that exit, but in the front it is.
Well, these are those challenges that I love that we get to participate in, because when we designed that crossover back kit, we had to try to keep in as many variables. No, we can't keep this many variables in that kit, but from what we put in that box, we get something that is engineered around multiple engine type configurations. You can use a modern motor, a classic motor. It's something where you can use an automatic or a manual transmission. We can deal with changes inside of the suspension. If you've got something where you've done some aftermarket, traction bars or things like that, we can accommodate that. Even so far as some of the early four-link systems, we have that triangulated four-link that GM like to use a lot in the back of those live axles, and people like to change the arm positions. Our exhaust is adjustable enough, and with all those pieces you saw, we can get from that frost member all the way to the tailpipe in about 90% of those applications.
Well, I was asked several times, what exhaust kit should I get to do this car and this car? So I wanted to bring Richard in so that we could simplify that for you, whether you're a full fabricator or you just want to assemble what's there. Hopefully this helps you so you can decide what you need for your project.